Want to be happy in retirement? I'm going to share with you the secret. It's going to be evidenced by studies by scientists. I'm going to share it with you here right now. You ready? Welcome again to the Heritage Wealth Planning YouTube channel. I'm absolutely glad you're here because this is going to be critically important as you consider when and where to retire. Where is the critical thing here? Now, if you've been following my channel at all, you'll note that I have already shared with you the secret about the happiness in retirement. And you might have found that somewhat contradictory because my secret was to have no mortgage. It's literally that simple. We've done studies that show people with no debt are happier in retirement, and people are becoming less and less happy in retirement. There's a huge correlation to the happiness level going down and the retirement housing debt going up. We see that time and again. But here's a study from the Washington Post. If you don't believe old Josh, I'm going to give you another piece of evidence to confirm not having debt in retirement is the secret to retirement happiness. Everything else is secondary, without question. Now, the Washington Post won't state that explicitly, but I'm going to share with you why. It's a pretty good article, just retirement debt, but also about just your sense of community and whatnot. Community, your lack of a commute, your homogeneous folks that you live with. I know everyone says diversity. I get that. Being diverse is cool. But at the end of the day, people like to be around who are people like them. It's just human nature, and to ignore that is silliness. It does not mean you discriminate against people. It just means most people want to be around people who are like them. I know that's crazy talk, but that's and other than the Western civilization, everyone else recognizes that simple fact of humanity since the dawning of mankind. Anyway, so this Washington Post just came out just the other day, and I found it very interesting just 3 days ago. People who live in small towns and rural areas are happier than everyone else, says researchers. There's science to back this up, my friends. And so let's go dive into this a little bit deeper. Team of happiness researchers from Vancouver School of Economics published a working paper on the geography of well-being in Canada. Now, my other paper that I researched, I researched it, I didn't write it, but I discussed the research on my video on the secret to retirement happiness. It was in America. Okay, so we did that researchers did a couple different studies. I used some other studies from Towers Watson, I think it's Morningstar, I believe, and then the academic research as well. So I cited three things, papers that that led me to conclude, and I think factually actually proven that the secret to happiness in retirement is not having a mortgage. Now these guys are in Canada, all right. So Canada and U.S. Not brothers necessarily, but maybe brothers from another mother. In this case, it wouldn't be another mother because we both come from, UK or Great Britain. But at the end of the day, we're still pretty close in terms of our similarities. Not 100%, but pretty close enough. But we are covering the two largest, the northern North American countries here, and both are going to have the same conclusions, actually. It's pretty interesting, actually. So these research compiled 400,000 responses, so statistically significant there, to a pair of national Canadian surveys, allowing them to parse out distinctions in well-being at the level of more than 1,200 communities, representing the entire geography of Canada. They were able to cross-reference the well-being responses with other survey data, as well as from the Canadian census, to see what sorts of characteristics were associated with happiness at the community level. Are happier communities richer? Are the people there more educated? Do they spend more time in church? So I can tell you right now, nope. And nope. We can cross those off right now. I already knew that going in, and you do too. More time in church, maybe. I think there's a correlation between more time in church and lack of debt spending, but I can't prove that. So I would not say more time in church equals more happiness explicitly. My anecdotal evidence would be yes, absolutely. I would not be able to say that statistically with any significance that there's a more than a casual correlation there. In my heart's heart, I think there is, but I would not be able to prove that. Being richer certainly does not lead to a happier community. We can prove that there's lots and lots and lots of studies now. That's not debatable. And then the more educated, again, does not correlate because the more educated is similar to being richer. and because that there's no correlation to higher levels of education, higher levels of disposable income, and happiness. We just don't see that. There is a correlation between more time in church there, but again, not enough that I would be comfortable saying it's statistically significant. The chief finding is a striking association between population density. Now, you might be thinking population density, Josh, is not the same as not having a mortgage. Hang with me. I'm going to show you how it does. And while I'm asking you to hang with me, don't forget to subscribe, my friends. Just take a minute. 1, 2, 3, pause. Subscribe. All right. Subscribe. I got this little thing down there. It's tiny, but if you just click on that, it's a subscribe button. So just do that real quick and we'll get that done. All right. So chief findings between association between population density and happiness. The research ranked all 1,200 communities by average happiness. They found the average population density is 20%, and the most miserable communities was 20% more than, let's see, I didn't read that right. When the research ranked all 1,215 communities by average happiness, they found the average population density in the 20%, there you go, 20% most miserable. So the bottom quintile communities was more than 8 times greater than the happiest quintile. So let me just rephrase that because I confused myself at first. You got 5 quintiles, 20, 20, 20, 20, 20. The top 20 and the bottom 20. The bottom 20 had a population density that was 8 times greater than the happiest population, than the happiest quintile. Amazing. Everyone says they moved to the city to be happy, yet, and according to this study of 400,000 respondents in 1,215 communities, is actually 100% opposite. The top quintile for happiness and the bottom quintile for happiness, a huge divergence in the population density. That's pretty interesting, but it's more to this than that. Life is significantly less happier in urban areas, the paper concluded. And they can show this. Now watch this. This is the map below of the Toronto. That's Toronto and some of the suburbs around that. The purple is the happiest and the orange is the least happiest. Now what you'll find, see these little black outlines? Black outlines denotes the area with a population density, the highest essentially, 400 people per square kilometer. Notice, not much black outlines, a couple, in the highest population, in the highest happiness quintile. Not much. Now, in the lower areas, lots of population density in the lowest of the bottom 2 quintiles. In the purple, got one there, a couple in here. Looks like one there, none there, a couple there. That's it. So essentially what they're saying is if you're in these 2 quintiles, you're going to have the highest population density. Look at that. Look at orange, blue. That's a higher one, but still, that's pretty interesting. That one right there is striking. I wonder what that, I don't know anything about Toronto's suburbs. I just wonder what that is because they're not very happy there and they are not happy here at all. And that's pretty dense too. And here's Toronto proper. Can't really see what it's showing there, but the happiness measure is derived from a survey question that asks responses how satisfied they are with their lives on a scale of 1 to 10. Across Canada, community level responses range from 7 to 9, basically. Basically 20% difference. All right. So if you're at a 7%, I'm at a 9%, that's about 25% difference. That means I'm 25% happier than you. That's a pretty big divergence there. So what makes the happiest communities different from the rest? And here's where I want to show you. This is actually interesting. Aside from fewer people, the authors found that happiest communities had shorter commute times, less expensive housing, and a smaller share of population was foreign born. They also found that people in the happiest communities are less transient than the least happiest communities, that they are more likely to attend church, and that they're significantly more likely to feel a sense of belonging in their communities. Again, not yet. I can see you're wondering, what does that have to do with the mortgage, Josh? Watch right here. Right there. 13% more happiness, the more happiness quintile are 13 percentage points less likely to spend over 30% of their income on housing, i.e., they don't say it explicitly, but they have cheaper homes, and I bet there's a lot of them that are paid off because they're 13 percentage points less likely to spend their income, 30% of their income, more than 30% on the housing. That inherently tells me less expensive homes, less of a mortgage that is making these people sweat at night. And I bet because of less expensive homes, less of a mortgage, a lot of the mortgages are paid off. And I mean, I'm willing to actually make that assertion for sure. I bet if you did the study, how many of these people had mortgages? The bulk would not compare to how many people had mortgages in the bigger, more affluent, more population dense places. I'm not going to guarantee anything, but I'd be rest assured that that's a similar, that there's going to be that's actually going to be true. Mortgages, my friends, the bigger the mortgage or no mortgage. You're in a high population dense area that's highly affluent, highly educated. That means your mortgage is going to be big. That means you're carrying that sucker into retirement. That means you're nervous about a lot of different things because you know at the end of the day, when all hell breaks loose, you have that mortgage to pay. Now, if you're living out in the rural area, that's less population dense. That's 8 times less dense as when you're living in the education metropolis of Toronto, wherever those are, McGill University, wherever that is. You're going to be saying, look, I don't need to live that far to live in that population density with the affluent rich people. A lot of transients, a lot of people move from McGill University to Queen's College in Dublin or whatever. So it's hard to establish a sense of community. Even with all the money, a lot of people moving back and forth. When they're moving, that's creating more and more demand for housing, which increases the price. Remember, the higher the demand, the higher the price, which means the mortgages are higher, as opposed to those folks out in the sticks. Less transient, more sense of community, lower mortgages. They're easier to pay them off, which means they don't have a mortgage a lot. They stay in their house. 11 percentage point happiness people are 11% more likely to have lived in their house for 5 years, in the area for 5 years. You say the house. So you have less transient people. You have lower cost of living, a lower commute. It's only 5 minutes shorter, but 5 minutes 2 times a day over 365 days or 200 days, whatever. So low density, low commute, low cost of housing for sure. More likely to, or less likely to be transient, more likely to be having roots in the area. 11% more likely to attend church. I think that goes hand in hand. A lot of the church goers, generally speaking, are going to button down and raise their kids and whatnot. More likely to have a sense of belonging in the community and less likely to be foreign born. I think these two things go hand in hand. Foreign born and transient and having less sense of community and being in the community for 4 years. That just shows me the community aspect of it is huge. I don't think it's so much foreign born. I think it has a sense of community. You've been in the community for a long time. You're less likely to leave that community. That's just all there is to it. And so because that, we're probably more likely to go to church together. We're more likely to know each other for years going by. And we're more likely to have that sense of community. We're more likely to have stayed in that one home for a longer time. The home is cheaper because we bought a longer time ago. Thus, we're more likely to pay off the mortgage. It all goes hand in hand in terms of happiness. It's interesting, actually. I think this is incredibly interesting. It may seem contradictory that greater happiness is correlated with both lower population density and a greater sense of belonging in one's community. But a significant body of research shows that having a strong social network is key to well-being. Some studies indicate that small towns and rural areas are more conducive than cities to forming strong social bonds, which would explain the greater sense of community. I completely agree with that. I think in cities, you got more transient population, people moving in and out. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But when it comes to net happiness, if you don't have that sense of community, it's just you kind of against the world. That is a problem. I absolutely do. And I think maybe we're kind of going back to that community kind of sense here. And one of the things I'm keen on, and I don't think it's going to happen, but I have my eyes open to it, would be the sense of just being a community-based grid. So you have your solar PV panels that generate electricity that you can store in these lithium-ion, big storage tanks, batteries, just within your neighborhood. And your neighborhood could, I'm running high this today because I got 4 kids. You're running low, and because you got 1 kid at home, whatever. We can sell it to each other, swap it back and forth. We can share it as a community. We can share it with the community next door. And this might be a little bit too pie in the sky stuff, but if we can get the battery storage to improve its capacity, at that point, the lack of efficiency on the PV panels, photovoltaic panels, will become less an issue than we have now. It's all going to be contingent on the batteries. Now, we've been hearing this for years. I get it. I'm not quite convinced that this is happening. I know people think in the next 3 to 5 years. My inclinations will come back 3 to 5 years from now, still using lead acid batteries with all the issues that go in there in terms of ability to store. You're going to depth of discharge, all these things on just basic engineering of batteries. You can't discharge it to 100%. If you do, you're going to ruin the battery a heck of a lot quicker than if you discharge it to 50%, which means it's really only 50% capacity. Don't want to get in that now. But just think about it. If we have these battery packs that can store electricity, photovoltaic, you're converting the sun's wattage into electricity. And if you can store that in a battery that can store it for an extended period of time, the depth of discharge, we can run that puppy down to 80%, 20%, whatever, 20%, without really diluting or being a detriment to the battery's long life. Man, that would be huge. And then you can trade electricity in the community. Now, that's just electricity. I'm not even talking about natural gas. I don't know how natural gas will be powered, or coal. We might not need as much coal, frankly, if we can do this electricity, but we're still going to need natural gas. I get that. But if we can just do electricity and swap it amongst each other in our community, that'd be huge. Perhaps even more surprising are the factors that don't appear to play a major role in community level and happiness. Average income levels. I told you, my friends. In fact, there are studies now that say about $71,000 is the primo place for retirement happiness. $71,000 of gross income. That ain't too shabby. That's not much when you think about it, but if you don't have any debt, $71,000 will do you just fine. Side note, I ask a lot of people when they retire. I say, well, how much do you think you need? I'm telling you, the vast majority is about $5,000 a month. I'm just telling you right now, $5,000 a month, because the vast majority have no home debt. That's all there is to it. Subscribe break. Subscribe down below. All right. Okay, so any average income, I got to keep reminding myself to tell people to subscribe throughout the video, because if I wait till the very end, even though I have a good long video duration, not that many people can watch the whole thing. So they're not going to be reminded to subscribe. And subscribing helps me to get the word out. So the more you subscribe, the more YouTube says, hey, this is a good video that people like. So don't forget to do that, please. Average income levels and rate of unemployment, education, like 100% agree. So your income level, your rate of unemployment, and your education, I would say your education and income kind of go hand in hand. But all three of those things are not significant when it comes to your happiness. It's pretty interesting. These findings comport with similar studies done in the United States, which have revealed a rural happiness gradient. The farther away from the cities, the happier people tend to be. Literally that simple. The authors, of course, aren't making any strong statements about causality, correlation, causation. But there is a clear association between low population density and reported happiness. But that does not mean that low population density creates happiness. A miserable city dweller who moves to the country might simply become a miserable country dweller. I completely agree with that. However, there's something about small towns and rural life that's associated with greater levels of happiness. So there you have it, my friends. Straight from the Washington Post. Not some right-wing rag by any stretch of the imagination. You want to be happy in retirement? I'm going to tell you, this just confirms what I've been saying for many years. Pay off your debt. Pay off your debt. Pay off your debt. That will afford you to live in a smaller community with smaller housing costs, lower housing costs. You're going to have some housing costs regardless. Lower property taxes, lower maintenance costs. If you have no mortgage, there's no debt servicing costs. A more sense of a community, less transient population. The proof is in the pudding. Proof is in the pudding. And and if the Washington Post is saying it, I'm not saying I believe in it, but this does confirm my previous studies and my own research I've done on this. So hope you find this helpful. Now you have the secret again, once again, from old Josh about the secret to retirement happiness right there for your very eyes to witness. I'll put a link in the show notes of this article. I do find it very interesting. Comments always helpful down there. The more interactions I get, comments helpful. So what's your take on that? What's your take on retiring into a smaller rural community? Is it just a pipe dream? Growing up, you're like, oh, the way things used to be, or is it something you're striving to do? For me, the Shenandoah Valley, just love it out there, Western Virginia. Just when my kids are out of school, that might be the place we end up. But where we are now, we like it. Apple trees are starting to go pretty well. My mulberry trees are starting to actually give me some mulberries, which I planted just a couple of years ago. So there is something to be said about living in a community and laying down roots and seeing the landscape, if nothing else, develop. And that's very comforting for sure. But if you have some thoughts, I'd love to hear them. Thumbs up, and of course, subscribe. And we'll see you next time on the Heritage Wealth Planning YouTube channel. Thanks, guys.